Dr. Alex Mercer pulled his coat tighter around him as the Arctic wind bit into his skin. The snow crunched under his boots, each step feeling like a mile in this frozen wasteland. The research team had been at this dig site for weeks, and Alex was beginning to feel the weight of the never-ending cold and darkness. He checked his watch. Midnight. Not that it made much difference this far north. Doc over here called Greg, one of the excavation workers, his voice barely cutting through the howling wind. Alex trudged over, his breath fogging up in the frigid air. Greg, a burly man with a usually calm demeanor now edged with excitement, was pointing at something half buried in the ice. Alex knelt down and brushed away the snow, revealing the faint outline of what looked like a metal container. It was old, very old. "Looks like we found something interesting," Alex said, more to himself than to Greg. They carefully pried the container open, the metal groaning in protest. Inside, wrapped in layers of deteriorating cloth, was a small leather-bound journal. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He opened it gently, the pages brittle with age. The entries were written in a mix of English and a language Alex didn't recognize. But one thing stood out immediately: crude drawings of a tall, emaciated figure, its face a blank, ghastly void. The journal belonged to an old Arctic explorer who spoke of a creature he called the Shy Guy. "Get this back to the base," Alex ordered. "We need to study it more closely." Back at the temporary base, Alex and his team pored over the journal. The explorer's accounts were harrowing. He described finding the creature in a cave, always hunched over, hiding its face. But when one of his team members accidentally looked at it, the creature went berserk, tearing through the camp with terrifying speed and strength. "This can't be real," muttered Sarah, one of Alex's colleagues, a biologist who had grown up in the rugged terrains of Alaska, lending her an unspoken resilience. "Real or not, we need to be careful," Alex replied, feeling the weight of responsibility for his team. "If there's even a chance this thing exists, we have to contain it." Days passed, and the team continued their work with a newfound sense of dread. Every shadow seemed to hide a lurking presence. Every gust of wind carried whispers of the unknown. Then, one night, their fears were realized. The alarm blared, waking Alex from a restless sleep. He jumped out of bed and ran to the control room. The monitors showed static, but one camera, aimed at the entrance to the dig site, flickered on and off. In one of those brief flashes, Alex saw a tall, pale figure standing at the edge of the camp, its face hidden in its hands. "God, it's here," he whispered. Panic set in as the team scrambled to secure the base. The power flickered, and the temperature seemed to drop even further. Alex grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the snow, his breath coming in short, fearful gasps. "Stay calm," he told himself. "We need to contain this thing." But as he approached the perimeter, he heard a low, mournful wail that sent chills down his spine. Alex turned, and there it was, mere feet away. The creature slowly uncovered its face, and Alex knew he had made a grave mistake. The next few moments were a blur of chaos and terror. The creature moved with impossible speed, its eyes those black, empty voids fixating on him. Alex ran, his heart pounding, knowing that looking back would be his end. He barely made it to the safety of the base, slamming the door shut behind him. The wailing continued, echoing through the night, a reminder of the horror that lurked just outside. Inside, Alex and his team regrouped, their faces pale with fear. The creature was out there, and they were its prey. The Arctic no longer felt cold, it felt like death, waiting patiently for them to slip up. And as Alex stared at the trembling faces of his colleagues, he knew that this was only the beginning. The real nightmare had just begun. The base was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes just before dawn in the Arctic, when the wind dies down and the snow settles. Dr. Alex Mercer sat in the control room, staring at the flickering monitors. His mind raced with thoughts of the creature they had seen. SCP-096, the Shy Guy. "How's it holding up?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence. She had dark circles under her eyes, a testament to the sleepless night they had all endured. "Still in the containment cell," Alex replied, glancing at the screen showing SCP-096 huddled in the corner, its face buried in its knees. "But for how long?" Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "This thing. It's like nothing we've ever dealt with." Suddenly, the monitor displaying SCP-096's cell went black. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He tapped the screen, but it remained dark. "What's going on?" Greg's voice crackled over the intercom, filled with static and worry. "Lost visual on 096, Alex responded. "Check the cameras." Greg's face appeared on one of the remaining screens, his eyes wide with fear. "We've got a breach in the containment area. It's out." The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Alex jumped up, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Everyone, lockdown procedures now." Alarms blared, red lights flashing throughout the base. The team scrambled, securing doors and windows, their faces masks of determination and fear. Alex grabbed a portable monitor and rushed to the containment area. The steel door was bent, twisted like a child's toy. SCP-096 had escaped. "How the hell did it get out?" Sarah's voice was sharp, panicked. "No time for that," Alex snapped. "We need to find it and contain it before it reaches the outside." The base's layout was a maze of corridors and rooms, all eerily quiet except for the distant wailing of the wind. Alex led the team, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound amplified by their fear. They found the first body in the mess hall. One of the workers, his face a mask of terror, limbs twisted in unnatural angles. Alex forced himself to look away, focusing on the task at hand. They had to find SCP-096. "Split up," he ordered. "Cover more ground. Keep your radios on and report any sightings immediately." Sarah and Greg nodded, each taking a different corridor. Alex moved forward, the tension in his muscles making each step a struggle. He rounded a corner and froze. There, at the end of the hall, stood SCP-096. Its back was to him, the creature hunched over, shaking. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He knew that if it saw him, it would be the end. He slowly backed away, heart pounding. "Alex, come in." Sarah's voice crackled over the radio, startling him. He fumbled for the device, trying to keep his movements quiet. "I'm here," he whispered. "I found it. End of the West Hall. Don't let it see you." "We're on our way," she replied. Alex kept his eyes on SCP-096, inching backward. The creature's wails grew louder, a mournful sound that seemed to echo through the entire base. Alex's mind raced with possibilities. How could they contain something so powerful, so relentless? The team regrouped, their faces pale but determined. "We need to lure it back to the containment area," Alex said, keeping his voice low. "Greg, get the tranquilizers. Sarah, cover the exits." As they moved into position, the base's power flickered, the lights dimming. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. The base seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Greg returned with the tranquilizers, his hands shaking. Ready. Alex nodded. On my signal. They moved as one, creeping toward SCP-096. Alex held his breath, each step measured and silent. They were almost there when the creature suddenly stopped wailing. The silence was deafening. SCP-096 turned, its face still hidden in its hands. Alex's heart pounded in his ears. Now he shouted. Greg fired the tranquilizers, the darts finding their mark. SCP-096 let out a bone-chilling scream, its body convulsing before collapsing to the ground. The team rushed forward, securing it with reinforced restraints. Got it, Greg panted, relief washing over his face. Alex exhaled, his muscles finally relaxing. Let's get it back to the containment cell. And this time we make sure it stays there. As they secured SCP-096, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered. The creature was contained, but for how long? And what would happen the next time it escaped? The questions haunted him as they returned to the control room, the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. The nightmare was far from over. The lights in the control room flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dr. Alex Mercer sat at his desk, the journal they had found in the Arctic open in front of him. His fingers traced the yellowed pages, the crude drawings of SCP-096, staring back at him. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the task ahead. Sarah entered, carrying a tray of steaming coffee. She set it down next to him, her eyes dark with worry. Any progress, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Some, Alex replied, taking a sip of the bitter liquid. The journal gives us clues, but it's like trying to piece together a nightmare from fragments of a dream. He flipped through the pages, stopping at a particularly disturbing entry. The explorer had written about SCP-096's reaction to being seen, describing in vivid detail the horrific consequences. The words were smeared, as if the writer's hand had trembled with fear. We need to understand what triggers it, Alex said, more to himself than to Sarah. Why does it react so violently to being seen? And why does it go into such a state of despair afterward? Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the journal. The Foundation's records might have more information. We should check the archives. They spent the next few hours delving into the Foundation's extensive database, searching for any mention of SCP-096. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the computers and the occasional rustle of paper. Alex's eyes grew heavy, but he pushed on, driven by a sense of urgency. Got something, Sarah said suddenly, breaking the silence. She pointed to a file marked classified. Alex leaned in, reading the summary. It detailed an experiment conducted years ago, an attempt to understand SCP-096's behavior. The experiment had ended in disaster, with several researchers dead and SCP-096 barely contained. The experiment involved showing SCP-096's image to test subjects, Sarah explained, her voice tense. Each time the results were the same. The creature would locate and terminate anyone who saw its face, no matter the distance. Alex frowned, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. So it's not just seeing it in person. Even a photograph can trigger it. Sarah nodded. Yes, but the file also mentions something else. a possible connection to another SCP, one that deals with visual perception and psychological manipulation. Alex's mind raced with possibilities. We need to find out more about this other SCP. If there's a link, it might help us understand 096 better. As they continued their research, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with tension. Every piece of information they uncovered seemed to lead to more questions, each more unsettling than the last. The Foundation's secrecy and the fragmented nature of the records only added to their frustration. Hours passed, the outside world fading into the background. Alex rubbed his temples, trying to stave off the growing headache. "There's something we're missing," he muttered. "Something important. Something important." Sarah looked up from her screen, her eyes wide. "Alex, look at this," she pointed to a series of images, each one more disturbing than the last. They showed SCP-096 in various states of agitation, its face always hidden but its body language screaming anguish. "These were taken during the experiment," Sarah said. "But there's a pattern here. Each time it was exposed to its own image, it reacted even more violently." Alex's blood ran cold. "Are you saying it can recognize itself? That it knows what it looks like?" "Maybe," Sarah replied. "Or maybe it's something deeper. A form of self-awareness that's driving it mad." The thought was chilling. If SCP-096 was aware of its own appearance, it added a layer of complexity to an already terrifying entity. Alex felt a knot of fear tightening in his chest. How could they possibly contain something that was not only powerful and relentless, but also potentially self-aware? "We need more data," he said, his voice resolute. "Let's dig deeper into the archives. See if we can find anything on this other SCP and any further connections." The hours dragged on, the tension in the room palpable. Every creak and groan of the base seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that SCP-096's presence lingered just beyond their sight.
As they worked, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that SCP-096 was not just a threat, it was a mystery, wrapped in layers of horror and madness. And with each revelation, the nightmare deepened, leaving Alex and his team teetering on the edge of a terrifying unknown.
The air was thick with tension as the alarm blared through the base, red lights flashing ominously. Dr. Alex Mercer felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. SCP-096 had escaped again, and this time it seemed more determined than ever. "Gear up," everyone, Alex shouted, strapping on his own equipment. The team moved with practiced efficiency, but there was an underlying current of fear in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. "How did it get out?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with anxiety as she checked her tranquilizer gun. "Doesn't matter now," Alex replied, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "We need to find it before it reaches the outside. We can't let it get to any populated areas." The team split into search groups, each assigned a sector of the sprawling base. Alex led his group through the narrow corridors, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The only sounds were their footsteps and the distant hum of the base's machinery. "Stay alert," he cautioned. "It could be anywhere." Minutes stretched into an eternity as they moved deeper into the base. Every corner held potential danger, every shadow a possible hiding place for SCP-096. The memory of its blank, ghastly face haunted Alex, driving him forward with a mix of fear and determination. They reached a storage area, the door ajar. Alex motioned for silence and carefully pushed the door open wider. The room was dimly lit, shelves casting long shadows across the floor. His breath caught in his throat as he spotted movement in the far corner. "It's here," he whispered into his radio. "Proceed with caution." His team spread out, closing in on the figure huddled in the shadows. SCP-096's sobs filled the room, a haunting, mournful sound that sent shivers down Alex's spine. He took a deep breath and aimed his tranquilizer gun. "On my mark," he said softly. 3, 2, 1. Now. The team fired simultaneously, darts embedding in SCP-096's pale skin. The creature's wail rose to a deafening pitch as it thrashed, its limbs flailing in pain and rage. Alex watched, heart pounding, as it struggled against the sedatives. "Hold steady," he urged. "It'll go down soon." But SCP-096 was more resilient than they had anticipated. It tore the darts from its body, its movements becoming more frantic. Alex realized with a sinking feeling that they hadn't used enough tranquilizer. "Fall back," he ordered. "Regroup and reload." The team retreated, their footsteps echoing through the halls. Alex's mind raced as he fumbled with his equipment. They couldn't afford another mistake. SCP-096 was a relentless hunter, and they were running out of time. Suddenly, the base's power flickered, plunging them into darkness. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He switched on his flashlight, the beam trembling as he scanned the corridor. "Report," he barked into the radio. "Power's out across the base," Greg's voice crackled back. "Backup generators are kicking in, but it'll take a few minutes." "We don't have a few minutes," Alex muttered. "Everyone, stay sharp and stick together. We need to keep moving." The team advanced cautiously, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Alex's grip tightened on his tranquilizer gun, every nerve on edge. They had to find SCP-096 before it found them. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the base, followed by the sound of metal tearing and glass shattering. Alex's blood ran cold. It was close. Too close. "Move," he shouted, breaking into a run. The team followed, their footsteps a chaotic rhythm in the dark. They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. SCP-096 stood at the end of the corridor, its back to them. It was tearing through a heavy steel door, its raw strength on full display. Alex's heart pounded in his ears. "Ready. Aim." "Fire," he commanded. Darts flew, striking SCP-096 again. The creature roared in pain, turning to face them. Alex caught a glimpse of its horrific visage before he averted his eyes. The image burned into his mind. "Keep firing," he yelled, not daring to look again. SCP-096 staggered, its movements slowing as the sedatives finally took effect. It collapsed to the ground with a final, anguished wail, its body twitching before going still. Alex let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Secure it," he said, his voice shaky. "And this time, make sure it can't get out." The team moved in, securing SCP-096 with reinforced restraints. Alex watched, his body trembling with a mix of relief and residual fear. They had contained it, but he knew this was only a temporary victory. As they dragged the creature back to its cell, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over him. SCP-096 was a relentless force, a nightmare that refused to stay locked away. And somewhere, deep in the recesses of his mind, he knew that this hunt was far from over. The real terror had only just begun. Dr. Alex Mercer sat in the dimly lit briefing room, the hum of the base's machinery a constant reminder of their isolation. The air felt heavy, oppressive. Sarah was next to him, scrolling through a series of documents on her tablet, her brow furrowed with concentration. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Alex glanced at her, exhaustion etched into his features. "What is it?" Sarah handed him the tablet. "I've been digging into the Foundation's classified files. There's something about SCP-096 that doesn't add up." Alex's eyes scanned the screen. The document detailed an experiment conducted years ago, one that involved a visual anomaly linked to SCP-096. As he read, a cold knot of dread settled in his stomach. "This can't be right," he muttered. "Are you saying there's another SCP connected to 096? Sarah nodded. SCP-035. It's a mask that causes extreme psychological changes in anyone who wears it. The file suggests there was an attempt to use SCP-035 to manipulate SCP-096. Alex's mind raced. What happened?
Sarah's face was pale. It ended in disaster. SCP-096 reacted violently, killing everyone involved in the experiment. But the logs mentioned something else. -96's behavior changed. It became more erratic, more dangerous.
Alex set the tablet down, the weight of the revelation sinking in. So, they tried to control it, and it backfired. Now we're dealing with the consequences. "We need to find out more," Sarah said, her voice urgent. "If there's any link between these CCPs, it could explain a lot about 096's behavior." They spent the next few hours combing through the archives, piecing together fragments of information. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the picture became. The Foundation's attempts to control SCP-096 had not only failed but had also exacerbated its violent tendencies. "Here," Sarah said, pointing to a document. "This one mentions a specific incident. A researcher who wore SCP-035 and interacted with 096. It drove him mad, but he left behind a journal." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "Do we have that journal?" "It's in storage, deep in the archives. We need clearance to access it." Alex stood, determination hardening his resolve. "Then let's get clearance. We can't afford to ignore any potential leads." They navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the base, the oppressive silence amplifying their unease. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to thicken, as if the walls themselves held their breath. At the archive room, they faced a heavy steel door, its surface cold and unyielding. Alex swiped his clearance card, and the door groaned open, revealing rows upon rows of shelves, each packed with classified documents and artifacts. "Start looking," he said, his voice tense. "We need that journal." They searched in silence, the only sound the rustling of paper and the occasional creak of the shelves. Time seemed to stretch, each second marked by the growing sense of foreboding. "Got it," Sarah said finally, holding up a worn, leather-bound book. "This is it." They returned to the briefing room, the journal's presence casting a shadow over their findings. Alex opened it carefully, the pages brittle with age. The handwriting was jagged, erratic, mirroring the writer's descent into madness. Subject 035 interacted with SCP-096, Alex read aloud. Initial results promising. 096 appeared calm, responsive. But then, changes. 096's behavior became erratic, aggressive. Subject experienced severe psychological distress. Termination required. Sarah shuddered. They thought they could control it, but they only made it worse. Alex nodded, his mind reeling. This is bigger than we thought. SCP-096 isn't just reacting to being seen. There's something deeper, something tied to its very nature. A sudden alarm pierced the air, jolting them from their thoughts. Alex's radio crackled to life. We have a breach. SCP-096 is on the move again. Alex felt his heart skip a beat. Lock down the base, he ordered. We'll meet in the control room. As they rushed to the control room, Alex couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. The more they learned about SCP-096, the clearer it became that they were dealing with a force beyond their understanding, a nightmare that defied logic and reason. The control room was a hive of activity, monitors flickering with images of the base. SCP-096 was a blur of motion, tearing through the corridors with terrifying speed. "What's it doing?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Alex watched the screens, his mind racing. It's not just escaping, it's searching for something, or someone. The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. SCP-096 wasn't just a mindless monster. It had a purpose, a twisted, horrifying purpose that drove its every move. And as Alex stared at the monitors, the full weight of their situation settled over him. They were up against an enemy they couldn't hope to understand, a force of nature that defied every attempt to contain it.
The hunt was far from over, and the real nightmare was only just beginning.
The base was in chaos. Alarms blared, and the red emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. Dr. Alex Mercer ran through the corridors, his heart pounding. SCP-096 was loose, and they had to stop it before it reached the outside world. "Everyone to your stations," Alex shouted into his radio. "We can't let it escape." Sarah's voice crackled back, tense and urgent. "We've sealed off the main exits, but it's moving fast. Too fast."
Alex's mind raced. SCP-096 was relentless, driven by a single purpose. He couldn't afford to think about what would happen if it got out. He turned a corner and nearly collided with Greg, who was carrying a tranquilizer rifle.
"Where is it now?" Alex asked, breathless. "Heading towards the old storage wing," Greg replied, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to cut it off." They sprinted down the hallway, the sounds of their footsteps swallowed by the cacophony of alarms. The storage wing was a maze of narrow corridors and cluttered rooms, a perfect place for SCP-096 to hide or ambush. As they approached the storage wing, Alex signaled for silence. They slowed their pace, moving cautiously. The air was thick with tension, every creak and groan of the base amplifying their anxiety. "Keep your eyes open," Alex whispered. "And remember, don't look directly at it." They advanced, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The storage wing was a labyrinth of shelves and crates, casting long, menacing shadows. Alex's pulse quickened with every step. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the corridor, freezing them in their tracks. SCP-096's wail, filled with rage and despair, reverberated through the walls. "It's close," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. They rounded a corner and saw it. SCP-096, its emaciated form hunched over, tearing through a pile of crates. It paused, sensing their presence, but its face remained hidden in its hands. "Now," Alex shouted. Greg fired the tranquilizer rifle, the dart striking SCP-096's pale skin. The creature roared in pain, thrashing violently. The team moved in, firing more darts, trying to bring it down. SCP-096 lunged, its speed terrifying. It knocked Greg aside, sending him crashing into the shelves. Alex felt a surge of adrenaline and fear as he fired another dart. The creature wailed, its movements growing sluggish. "Keep at it," Alex yelled. "It's working." But just as they seemed to gain the upper hand, the lights flickered and died. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the sporadic beams of their flashlights. "Stay together," Alex commanded, his voice trembling. "Don't let it out of your sight." In the chaos, he heard Sarah scream. He swung his flashlight around, its beam catching a glimpse of SCP-096 towering over her, its face inches from hers. She froze, her eyes wide with terror. "No," Alex cried, rushing forward. Before he could reach her, SCP-096's head snapped up, its eyes locking onto Alex. The creature let out a spine-chilling shriek, a sound that seemed to pierce the very fabric of the air. Alex averted his gaze just in time, feeling the intense malice directed at him. "Sarah." "Move," he shouted. Sarah scrambled to her feet, retreating into the shadows. SCP-096 turned its attention back to Alex, its body trembling with rage. Alex's mind raced, searching for a way to distract it. "Over here, you monster," he yelled, throwing a crate to the side. The noise drew SCP-096's focus, and it charged towards him. Alex ducked into a narrow passage, leading the creature away from his team. He could hear its heavy breathing, its footsteps echoing behind him. He emerged into a wider corridor, his heart pounding. There he spotted a containment chamber, the door slightly ajar. If he could lure SCP-096 inside and lock it, they might have a chance. "Come on," Alex taunted, waving his flashlight. The creature followed, its movements erratic but purposeful. Alex darted into the chamber, SCP-096 close on his heels. He reached the control panel and slammed the door shut, sealing them both inside. SCP-096 paused, its face still hidden, its body trembling with suppressed fury. Alex backed away slowly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's over," he said, trying to convince himself as much as the creature. "You're contained." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. SCP-096 was a relentless force, driven by an insatiable need. This containment was temporary, a fleeting victory in a battle they were destined to keep fighting. Outside the chamber, the team regrouped, their faces pale and drawn. Alex's voice crackled over the radio, heavy with exhaustion. "We've contained it. For now," he said. "But we need a permanent solution. This can't go on." As the team began the long process of securing the base and tending to the wounded, Alex couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. SCP-096 was a nightmare that refused to end, a relentless hunter that would stop at nothing to achieve its goal. And as he stared at the trembling walls of the containment chamber, he knew that their ordeal was far from over. The chase had ended, but the real horror was just beginning. The fluorescent lights in the medical bay buzzed softly, casting a harsh, sterile glow over everything. Dr. Alex Mercer sat on the edge of a cot, his mind numb from the events of the past few hours. His muscles ached, and his head throbbed with the beginnings of a headache. Sarah handed him a cup of coffee, her own hands trembling slightly. Thanks, he murmured, taking a sip. The bitter liquid did little to calm his nerves. We need to talk about what happened, Sarah said, sitting across from him. Her eyes were tired but determined. That was too close. We can't keep going like this. Alex nodded, staring into his coffee. I know. We need a long-term solution. Something that will actually contain SCP-096. Greg entered the room, his arm in a sling. He had taken a nasty hit during the confrontation, but he was lucky to be alive. Any ideas, he asked, joining them at the table. Alex rubbed his temples. We need to understand why it's so relentless. What drives it? Maybe if we can figure that out, we can find a way to neutralize it. Sarah nodded. I've been looking at the old experiment logs. There might be something there, something we missed. We need to dig deeper. They spent the next few hours in the control room, sifting through data and old reports. The hum of the computers and the occasional clatter of keys were the only sounds, a stark contrast to the chaos of earlier. The tension in the room was palpable, a constant reminder of the threat they faced. Here, Sarah said suddenly, pointing to a series of symbols that matched those in the book. These are linked to SCP-035. If we can find out more about its influence on 096, we might be able to figure out a way to neutralize it. Alex nodded, his eyes tired but determined. Good work. Greg, any luck on your end? Greg looked up from his screen, a frown creasing his forehead. I found references to an experiment involving 035 and 096. The details are classified, but it mentions a catastrophic failure and a severe psychological impact on the subjects involved. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. We need to know exactly what happened. There must be logs, recordings, something that can give us more insight. They combed through the archives, their search growing more desperate with each passing minute. The sense of foreboding was almost palpable, a constant reminder of the threat they were up against. Finally, they found a series of audio logs buried deep in the classified files. Play the first one, Alex said, his voice tense. The recording crackled to life, a voice filled with anxiety and fear filling the room. This is Dr. Hargrave. We've initiated the experiment with SCP-035 and SCP-096. Initial results are promising. 096 seems calmer, more responsive. But there are changes. 035's influence is stronger than anticipated. The log continued, detailing the progression of the experiment. The excitement in Dr. Hargrave's voice slowly gave way to concern, then fear. We've lost control. 096 is reacting violently to any visual stimuli. It's as if 035 has amplified its rage. We can't contain it. The facility is in lockdown. God help us all. The recording ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Alex's mind raced with possibilities. SCP-035 had amplified 096's reactions, making it even more dangerous. But there was something else, something they were missing. There has to be a way to reverse this, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. If 035 can amplify 096's reactions, maybe we can find a way to dampen them. Greg nodded, his expression grim. We need to isolate the exact nature of 035's influence. If we can counteract it, we might have a chance. They worked late into the night, the sense of urgency driving them forward. The base seemed to hold its breath, the walls closing in, as if aware of the dire stakes. Every creak and groan of the building felt like a reminder of the relentless hunter that could break free at any moment. Finally, Sarah looked up from her notes, her face pale but resolute. "I think I've found a way. If we can expose 096 to a counteracting agent, something that neutralizes 035's influence, we might be able to calm it down permanently." Alex felt a flicker of hope. "Do we have the materials here?" Sarah nodded. "I think so, but we'll need to be precise. One mistake, and it could all go wrong." As they prepared the counteragent, the tension in the room was palpable. This was their best chance, but also their riskiest move yet. The sense of foreboding hung over them like a dark cloud, the knowledge that failure meant certain doom. "We're ready," Greg said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Let's do this." They moved to the containment chamber, their hearts pounding with anticipation. SCP-096 lay still, its body restrained but its presence a constant threat. Alex took a deep breath, the counteragent in hand. "Here goes nothing," he said, stepping forward. As he administered the counteragent, a tense silence filled the chamber. For a moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, SCP-096's body relaxed, its breathing steadying. The sense of rage and violence seemed to ebb away, replaced by a calm stillness. "It's working," Sarah whispered, relief washing over her. Alex felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but the sense of foreboding remained. They had taken a step towards neutralizing SCP-096, but the battle was far from over. The real challenge lay ahead, and the nightmare was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike.
The base was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that magnifies every creak and whisper. Dr. Alex Mercer paced the control room, his thoughts a tangled mess. They had managed to calm SCP-096, but it felt like a temporary reprieve, a fragile piece that could shatter at any moment.
"We need to keep monitoring its behavior," Sarah said, breaking the silence. She sat at her station, her eyes fixed on the monitors displaying SCP-096 in its cell. Any changes, no matter how small, could be significant. Alex nodded, his mind elsewhere. "Agreed. But I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something, that there's more to this than we realize." Greg entered the room, carrying a stack of reports. "I've been going through the logs from the old facility. There are references to experiments and anomalies, but nothing concrete." Alex's interest peaked. "What do you have?" Greg spread the reports on the table. "There are vague mentions of SCP-096's origins, hints at some kind of visual anomaly related to its behavior, but it's all fragmented." Sarah looked up, alarmed. "If there's something about its origins, it could be key to understanding how to contain it." Alex's heart pounded. "We need to find out more. Maybe there are clues we missed, something that can give us a clear direction." They worked together, sifting through the reports and cross-referencing with their own data. The sense of foreboding grew with each discovery, the pieces of the puzzle forming a dark and ominous picture. As they delved deeper, the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Alex's skin prickled with unease. "We need to secure the base. We can't afford to be unprepared."
Greg nodded, heading to the security console. "I'll initiate lockdown procedures. We can't take any risks."
The base shifted into high alert, the heavy doors sealing with a metallic clang. The tension was palpable, a tangible force that pressed down on them. Alex stared at the monitors, watching SCP-096 closely. The creature was calm, its body relaxed, but there was something in its stillness that unnerved him. Suddenly, the monitors flickered, and a high-pitched alarm sounded. "Intrusion detected in Sector 4," the automated voice announced. Alex's heart raced. "Sector 4? That's near the old containment wing. What the hell is going on?" Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, bringing up the security feed. The screen showed a shadowy figure moving with unnatural speed, its form a blur. "That's not possible," she whispered. "It can't be 096. It's still in its cell." Greg's voice was tight with fear. "If it's not 096, then what is it?" Alex grabbed a flashlight and a tranquilizer gun. "We need to investigate. Greg, stay here and monitor the feeds. Sarah, you're with me." They moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors, the sense of dread growing with each step. The base felt like a tomb, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the generators.
As they approached Sector 4, the temperature seemed to drop, the air thick with an oppressive presence. Alex's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls.
"Stay close," he whispered, his voice barely audible. They rounded a corner and froze. The door to the old containment wing was ajar, a faint light spilling out. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed the door open, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Inside, the room was a chaotic mess of overturned equipment and scattered papers. In the center stood SCP-096, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. It turned to face them, a low growl rumbling from its throat. "Back away slowly," Alex hissed, trying to keep his voice steady. But before they could react, SCP-096 let out a blood-curdling wail, its body convulsing. The creature's eyes snapped open, and it began to thrash violently, straining against its restraints. Sarah's voice was frantic. "It's reacting to something. We need to get out of here now." Alex's mind raced. They were trapped with one of the most dangerous CPs, and the walls seemed to close in around them. He took a step back, his heart pounding in his ears. "Move," he shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm. They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of SCP-096's wails echoing behind them. The base seemed to shake with the force of its rage, the lights flickering wildly. As they reached the control room, Greg's face was pale with fear. "We're losing containment. 096 is breaking free." Alex's blood ran cold. "We need to seal off the wing. It's the only way." Greg nodded, his hands trembling as he initiated the lockdown sequence. The heavy doors slammed shut, sealing the old containment wing off from the rest of the base. The control room fell silent, the monitors showing static. Alex stared at the screens, his mind reeling. They had narrowly escaped, but the danger was far from over. "We're not safe yet," he said, his voice grim. "We need to find a way to stop it for good." The sense of foreboding hung over them like a dark cloud, the knowledge that their battle was far from over, a constant weight on their shoulders. As they regrouped, the realization settled in the real nightmare was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The final confrontation with SCP-096 loomed on the horizon, a shadow of impending doom that threatened to engulf them all.